Hello, Pokaminders!
And welcome to our weekly Pokapod,
where we discuss everything related to mental well-being as well as our journey as a startup.
I'm your host, Yusuf.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And today we're gonna poke some minds. Hello, Pokaminders, and it's been a few months since we last talked.
Long minute.
Very long minute. But we're back, and we're back strong. And can you give us a quick update, Sarah, about what has been happening? I mean, a lot happened in the past 3 months.
Yes. Where do I even start? In the past 4 months, we've been working very hard with positioning of Poka Window, and actually we've released an alpha version of the product. So we've been testing it with a few people, around 30 people that are testing it out and giving us feedback. And we are also launching the beta very soon. So if you want to be part of that, just send us an email at team@pokamind.com and I'll be in touch with you very quickly. Other than that, we've also grown as a team. We have around 4 new people, of which 3 psychologists who are going to be recording a few episodes as well. So
yeah, that's a big update, right?
Yeah, so we'll be restructuring the podcast as well, and that will come very soon.
So in the next week, you'll probably hear from our team of psychologists. So we have Katya, which will be mainly talking about clinical approaches and things that are more important to our listeners. We have Emma, which is currently doing research quite a lot. And we have Maria, which is a very wholesome person that just likes to do a lot of CBT, I think, like a lot of therapy, a lot of wholesome thinking and positive thinking.
Yeah, a lot of journaling.
Yeah, I feel like she's a very positive person to be around.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. Every other week in between our podcasts, they will be releasing some educational content where you can learn about how to deal with anxiety, what techniques work and what doesn't, and yeah.
And you can send us questions of things that you want us to answer for. Our psychologist will contact you, or they will address it on their podcasts. And they're probably going to alternate between weeks, or you're going to hear some discussions from them.
So yeah, stay excited for that.
Yeah, super exciting change. What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about burnout, and it's a big topic recently because of work-life balance, and mental health is increasing in importance at the workplace, and everyone is becoming more aware of how they're feeling at work and how work makes them feel in general. However, I did not know that it was associated with physical and mental symptoms. So
yeah.
I thought it was just like, oh, I'm feeling a little tired today, so
no,
that I feel burnt out. I used to use it so lightly.
No, I mean it's related to increased heart rate. It's related to sweating. I mean, it can affect you physically quite a lot. Even your skin reacts to it if you're burnt out.
Yeah. Like you feel drained out of energy for a longer period of time, and it's just a whole condition and world that I didn't know of.
Yeah, what's the cause of burnout? Like, I think it's, from my perspective, I don't think I've ever been that burnt out. I've been burnt out before, but it wasn't to that extent, and it was from like working too much or being focused and isolated for so long and just hyper focused on one thing. Yeah. And that was the reason I burnt out. But it can happen from multiple reasons as well. It's not just work, right?
What kind of things can you think of? Because I don't know exactly the science behind it, but I know that, for example, in my case, I started to feel burnt out last May, around that time. And the reason for that was because I felt very claustrophobic and the weather was not doing well, and I was just at home doing the same thing. I was stuck in a routine every day, and then I just felt like I needed change. I needed something to happen in my life. So I started feeling this dull dreadedness towards work and just not wanting to do anything. But I think that it encompasses a lot more things than that. Like, this is my case, but I don't know how it is for other people that actually go to the office and meet people, and there's like a whole work environment situation happening.
I mean, being burnt out is not specifically related to work just because of that. Like, you got burnt out because of the environment was repetitive. So you felt low, you felt exhausted just because it was the same thing every day. That can burn you out as well. A lot of burnout, for example, from what I know, is from people that have social anxiety, for example, and they would be burnt out just because they're hanging out with people for too long, and that can burn them out. And I'm not talking about the typical description of, oh, I'm an introvert, so hanging out with people drains me.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about people that really, really would get stressed when they hang out with people, and if they have to, like in a work environment, or if they have a lot of social events lined up and they go out often but they're not enjoying it, then you can get burnt out from that as well.
I mean, that's an interesting perspective because I've only heard it in the context of work. So hearing about it from just normal things, daily things, is very interesting.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, we can move on now to our interesting speaker. Who do we have today?
Today we have Christina Egerstrom with us, who's going to be sharing her experience with burnout at her previous company. She's not working there anymore, but she's currently recovering from her burnout. She's going to be telling us all about the symptoms that she experienced and how she's currently dealing with it to incorporate more things into her day-to-day life and getting back to how it was before.
So we're handing it off to Christina and Sarah.
Hi, Christina, and welcome to our podcast. We're really happy to have you here today to talk about burnout. But before we do that, maybe you can start off by introducing yourself to us.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to be here. And my name's Christina, and my background is in marketing. And I used to work for a startup as their content marketer. And as in a lot of startups, you often end up doing quite a lot. So it's pretty easy to end up in burnout area. Yeah. So that happened to me. And I'm here to talk about my experience with that and the recovery that I had to do to get back to myself.
Yeah. You can tell us maybe a little bit more about the first signs to burnout, how to recognize it, because I suppose this is the first time you experienced burnout, or?
I think it's the second time, but I think the first time that it happened, I didn't know that it was a thing, so I didn't even have the knowledge to recognize the signs. Yep. So I didn't even think about it or take any action. So it was something that stayed with me quite a while. This was back in university. But this time I did start to notice. But burnout is pretty sneaky. So it's a thing that often you don't see coming until it's a bit too late, just because at that point you're already exhausted. And this time, one of the first signs was a loss of motivation, that I didn't feel like I was so involved in my work. I wasn't as motivated to push and create new things. I just started to do the basics of what my job required. And I'm usually someone who likes to push and comes up with a lot of ideas and is very creative. And I started to feel a loss of creativity as well. And I think that's also something that is often an early sign of burnout, that you don't come up with as many ideas. And of course, your energy levels go down.
Yeah.
So I did feel a lot less myself. And when you get home, you have a lot less energy to do pretty much any activity. So I ended up going through a period where I would only get home and watch Netflix, because that's all I felt capable of, which means your social life kind of goes into the trash, and you stop exercising. Yeah, your life becomes very simple because you can't quite handle more than that.
Yeah, and I can imagine that a lot of people experience burnout without even knowing, because I didn't even know that it was a thing before until like I met you and you were telling us about this burnout experience and how you just lose motivation, and most of the time you just think that it's part of life. You just don't feel like doing anything, and you just don't know why, or you think that something is wrong with you, when in reality it's been too much, or you've been taking on too much and you haven't set any boundaries. And I think it's interesting.
Definitely the boundaries part is an important thing if you want to prevent burnout, because we were such a small team where I was working at. It was difficult to set them just because everyone was doing too much. So we constantly were juggling multiple things all at the same time. The problem with burnout is that it does require stepping back. So if you're not able to step back a little bit and reduce your workload to try and recover when it hasn't got into kind of critical levels, it really does start spiraling downwards. And the situation I was in, basically, there was no possibility of reducing the workload. It was the opposite.
Yeah.
So it kept increasing despite my energy levels going down, which obviously is a very bad combination. And eventually I ended up in a space where I knew I was burnt out, just because I started reading a little bit more about it, because I also went through this denial phase. It's like, it's just normal. You have periods where you don't feel as motivated or as well, where you don't have so much energy. It's fine. And you kind of keep going with that mentality until I kind of started to feel like maybe I'm depressed, because at the beginning I had been feeling the loss of motivation, more cynical, less social for around 2 weeks. And I was like, no, it's too early. You can't, there's maybe nothing wrong if it's just been 2 weeks. Eventually those feelings, it was 2 months, then it was 3, and then it was like, okay, there's a problem here, because it's been 3 months where I feel like this and there's been no change whatsoever. I'm losing weight. I'm actually feeling worse. I'm feeling very drained emotionally. I can't handle situations that I'm usually very capable of handling. And then I started to read a little bit. And another, maybe more unknown side of burnout is that you become very cynical. So you start mistrusting people, you start mistrusting the company you're in, mistrusting your managers, thinking that they're taking advantage. It becomes a very vicious circle of negativity.
So during this period, you were still taking on more and more work without even realizing that it was the thing that was taking a toll on you.
At this point, I was trying to at least reduce a little bit of it. And at least with myself, I was really trying to prioritize the things that I had to do, because I knew I didn't have the energy to do all of them.
Yeah.
So I was very careful about what I chose to do first, because I knew that by the end of the day I was going to feel drained. But I didn't really get the chance to reduce my workload And in the end, I ended up quitting because I just couldn't handle the situation anymore, because I just felt too depressed, too dismotivated, super cynical. I started hating my job. I started hating the product that we were working on. And once upon a time, I loved it. So, it makes me quite sad that it got to that point, because it was a job I enjoyed at the start until the burnout kind of destroyed the experience of it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important to love your work. Otherwise, that's what you do every single day. Otherwise, it's a bit hard to just keep on going. But what I got from you is that you didn't get any support from your management. So it just became worse and worse until you ended up quitting instead.
Yeah, and I think there's an issue as well there, that management itself was very swamped as well. And because it is such a small company, they don't really have the structure in place to help people in the company when they're going through these kinds of things. So it really kind of ended up becoming a space where there wasn't much anyone could do for me. And I ended up feeling like the only thing I could do to take that space for my own mental health and to recover my energy levels, recover my motivation, recover my creativity, was to step away. And that's what I did. And after that, there was around a month there where I was not well, in the sense that the tiniest emotional complication, whatever that might be, felt absolutely exhausting to me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I needed to sleep all the time. And I had to really be careful about the amount of activity that I did in a day. So I had to add little by little every day that passed, and really be honest with myself about what I could handle. And if one day I pushed too much, it was to accept and recognize that I had done so and step back the next day and wait until I was actually ready to increase the activity level, and just be patient with it. Because burnout, one of the maybe frustrating parts about it is that it just takes time to recover from it. And I think we live in a society where we always feel like we need to be productive. So it can be hard to take time to rest without feeling guilty about it, or without feeling that you should be doing more. And burnout is something that really forces you to step back.
Yeah, I mean, that was our first topic on the podcast, where we talked about the fact that sometimes you just can't be productive every single day because it's exhausting to be productive every single day, and you have to take time for yourself and reflect on how you feel and what you can manage for that day to be able to be productive in the future, because otherwise it will just be a vicious cycle. And I can imagine that it was a hard experience for you to quit your job. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, especially in this economic situation. We need the money to survive, but I'm proud of you for taking care of your mental health and prioritizing it and putting it first, and quitting despite everything, despite what society would tell you, that you need to work, you need to be productive all the time. And yeah, I'm impressed by your journey. Is there any advice you would provide our listeners with on how you came to that decision and how you felt quitting? Or
I would say it was a very hard decision. It took me months to get to that point, and I tried different things to try to make the workspace work with my mental health at the time. It was after a while that I realized that nothing really was changing, and that if I stayed there, the price of staying would have been too high, in the sense that I think I would have ended up in a major depression, because I was heading in that direction. And burnout, if it gets to that point, will take you there. It is one of the conditions that is associated with depression and anxiety. So I would say it is worth, if you do like your job, if you like the team that you work with, try speaking to, whether it's your manager, your colleagues, try getting help first and see if things can change to make it easier for you to recover, or if you can take some time off. All of those things are worth trying.
Yeah.
If those things don't happen and you feel yourself continuing to spiral into greater cynicism, more negativity, less energy, less creativity, it's better to leave that situation, because I think I left early enough that it took me around a bit over a month to recover from the burnout that I had. But if it gets to a lot more chronic levels, it is a condition that can take around 6 months to get over. And of course, over those 6 months, it can be so debilitating that you can't work anymore.
Yeah.
For me now, I can work, so I can kind of reinitiate my life and do new things and get back to working, which is something that we all need to do. And but don't let it get to a point where it takes so much time from you.
Yeah.
So try to get help. If you can't get it where you're working, it might be a very bad sign, and you should maybe get out of there.
Yeah, I think the company environment is very important as well, because it can either make it worse and they don't listen to you as you've experienced, or they can make it better. For example, my boss at ICA, I think, I'm not entirely sure what her problem was, but I know that she had experienced some mental condition or issues, or was burned out, and the management gave her or reduced her workload, even though she was a boss and she was responsible for a whole team. They dealt with it in a way that made her recover, and now she's back full time again. So they reduced her workload to 25% for her, to allow her to go to rehabilitation and work on herself and go to the doctor, see what's wrong, and like come back stronger. So now she even switched roles to something she loves doing because she felt stuck. And I think in Sweden, if you speak up, you might get the help that you need, because they're very open about it and do care about the mental health of their employees, especially since it's becoming such a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Probably they don't want to get cancelled or something. But it was inspiring to see that a company can actually care, and if you ask for it, they will give you the help you need. So I'm pretty sure she was still getting paid, even though she was working 25%, so that she's able to take care of herself. But I can imagine that it's harder for people that do not have that support, and if you cannot just quit your job because you have a family to take care of, or I don't know, it can be harder for some people to just make that decision.
Absolutely. And there, if you don't have the option of quitting, especially somewhere like Sweden, it is really worth, because you are entitled to ask for recovery.
Yeah.
And especially when it's related to work. And here you will get it. And there's a lot more protections for you as an employee than there are in other countries.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time. I didn't grow up in Sweden, so I didn't really know what I was entitled to. So I didn't know how to ask for it. I didn't know it existed. So I didn't feel like there were any options.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there would have been, and I could have gotten help through my employer, which you can, because most employers are connected to a healthcare provider, and it's usually included in your insurance that comes through your work. I was not aware of the fact, so I didn't pursue that path. If I were to go back, I would have.
Yeah.
because it is much easier. Plus, it doesn't require such a big financial sacrifice, whether that's
Exactly.
quitting or seeking help on your own. Because then of course, the doctor's appointments and seeing a psychologist falls under your costs and not the company. But people who work in Sweden should know that the company you work for will pay for you to go see a psychologist and speak with an occupational psychologist about things like burnout or depression, or if you have a major life event that really impacts your productivity or your ability to work, you can seek that support.
Yeah, and I think companies should become better at educating their employees about their rights and what they can get help with and what they can't. Because they tell us about like physical health that you can get help with. If you, I don't know, break a leg on your job site, you will get help. You're insured from your like employer.
Yeah.
But if it's your mental health that's affected, it's a lot harder to first of all prove to them. So I think that's one major thing that prevents people from going, because you can't really, I don't know, it's harder to talk about. Tell them, hey, I don't feel good. Seeking help is hard.
Yeah.
Even if you know that you should probably seek help, it takes a lot of courage to do that. And especially if you don't know what kind of help you can get from your employer. So I think definitely educating your employees about their rights is an important step to preventing potential burnout or depression at work. And
Yeah, and I think it's to the benefit of the company as well to do that. Because of course, if you're not investing in your employees' mental health and well-being, it is very likely that they will end up in a place of burnout or dismotivation, and you might lose them. And obviously turnover is not beneficial for any company, and especially startups when teams are so small. Losing one person and then having to invest in replacing them is a big cost to the company. So it really benefits everyone to take care of every employee's mental health, so that they feel motivated, they're more creative, they're more productive. There's so many benefits, and a company should be more understood how much a company can save by actually investing in their employees' well-being.
And then also, not only can they lose the person if this person doesn't seek help and continues on working, and they feel dismotivated and they just feel like they just don't want to, it will affect the quality of the work of the company. So it affects the company negatively if the person stays as well, because they're not putting in what they can, and this will affect the quality of the company as well.
Yeah, if you limit the potential of your people, you limit the potential of the company.
Happy employees, happy company, successful company.
For sure. Yeah, it's and even things like customer service, or outward facing roles. If your employee is dismotivated, it comes through. So it will eventually impact you and impact the image of your company, because people will notice.
You'll get negative reviews on
on Yelp.
It's like, don't work there.
Skip it.
So are there any other things that you noticed with burnout, and how are you getting back into everyday life now, and what are your plans for the future?
So the first thing was really to give myself the space to rest and pretty much empty my brain of plans and strategies and ideas, because you do need to just kind of press restart. And at the beginning, I was just going on long walks, trying to get sleep in, eating healthy, just really kind of going back to basics and building from there. So setting up this kind of healthy foundation again that was more balanced. And from there, you can start adding new projects little by little. So I started working on my LinkedIn, and that was what I was focusing on at the beginning, and really noticing if I felt my energy going down, and stopping myself from continuing when that happened, and then just taking a step back. The next day, maybe adding an hour more. So you really have to be quite systematic with how you do it.
And self-aware.
And
I assume.
Yeah, and it's a lot tougher than one thinks to have that control, because we all kind of set expectations on ourselves, and you maybe want to get certain things achieved in a day, and with burnout you may not be able to do so. And I think there you really have to exercise self-compassion, that it's okay, that you're still recovering, and that you can give yourself time. There is nothing you will gain from rushing it or from forcing yourself to do more. So it's really just stepping back and allowing yourself to move more slowly. And I think I did have this expectation of having to be running all the time, and there is no single human that can do that. You do need to slow down at times. Sometimes you need to step back and just walk. And a lot of people say this in the startup and entrepreneurship world. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Yeah. So make sure you can stay and you protect your energy so that you can get to the finish line and not have to quit in the process.
Do you think doing things that you like helped you as well, or?
I think it helped. The fact that I had a dream that I wanted to pursue outside of the work that I had, that I wanted to go back to freelancing, and I wanted to build my own consultancy. That was definitely something that helped me recover, because it was something I really wanted to do. So it was a goal that forced me to really take the time to recover so that I could do that sooner rather than later. Because if I had pushed from the very next day that I quit, I probably would have relapsed. Yeah. And then it would have taken me longer to get started. So it's really thinking very strategically about, like, what do I gain from forcing myself to launch into this new thing immediately, and weigh kind of the pros and cons. And in this case, it didn't make sense to force it.
I can imagine. Just go cold turkey.
yeah.
On the next thing. Being like, okay, I'm tired again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then obviously you don't want to set up yourself for failure. And if you go into something with terrible mental health, that is what you're doing.
Yeah. But burnout is not limited to the workplace, of course. Burnout, as you said, you experienced it in university, and I know that I've probably hit a wall at some point during my education, especially since I went to a school in Tunisia, and there the system is very intense, I should say. So it doesn't have to be related to something specific. It can happen whatever you're doing. If you push yourself beyond your limits and don't know your boundaries, this can happen. And it's important to just have an open mind about it, that this can happen, and that when it does, or when you start noticing that it is going in that direction, that you take a step back and work towards preventing this from happening.
Yeah, it often comes from just having a million things that you need to do. It doesn't have to be work things. I know a lot of moms who are also completely burnt out just because they have so much to balance. Yeah. It comes from having no mental space and no time really to recover or to take a moment for you. And often, even if it's not through an employer, people who are working all of the time, often you will hear them talk about how tired they feel all the time. That's usually a sign that you might not be having enough time for yourself and for you to just reset a little bit. And often they say that recovery it needs to start when your energy is at 50%, not when it's at 0%.
Yeah.
Because at that point, the only thing you will get to when you take a little bit of time to recover is that 50%, and then it'll crash again, and you'll end up in that space. So it's taking action earlier and trying to create those spaces for yourself, even if it's just 10 minutes, or on Saturdays you go on a walk, just you, and you disconnect from your phone, you're not looking at things, you're just walking and thinking, because that will be very refreshing for your brain, and it will help create that mental space, which is so important. And when you don't have it, that's when things like anxiety, burnout, depression become a lot harder to handle.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was just thinking that when things do get too much, that you would just do the small things that you enjoy for yourself. I don't know, that can be even just cooking with some music on. Enjoy yourself doing that.
Exactly.
Reading a book, I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be, I'm taking the day off.
No, exactly. Watch a movie.
I love watching Netflix. Sometimes binge watching like a few episodes is
that
really
can be
nice.
very healing.
Recommend doing that from time to time.
For sure.
For yourself. Or even just journaling. I know I used to love doing that in the morning. I stopped, unfortunately, but I found other things to do. I think it's a phase in my life that I go through. I journal sometimes, and I think like that gives me the time to think about things and what's going on in life, because otherwise you tend to forget that you're also living your life and not just life is going on.
Yeah, I think those moments just give you time to catch up with yourself, because sometimes you feel like you're running away from you. And if you're always on this high energy, super fast pace, that is kind of what you're doing. And eventually you catch up with yourself, and you just think like, what happened? How did I even get here? And it's just because you were not stopping. Exactly. And then you even forget, like, who was I? Before I was just so swamped. And you do step back and start to redefine. And maybe one of the silver linings of going through a major burnout is that you start understanding yourself better and your limits better. Before you experience burnout, it can be hard to know where to set those boundaries, just because you're not quite sure where they should be. It also helps you define who you are in relation to work, and trying to separate. It helps you separate your identity from your work, because you notice that when you invest your entire self into a workspace, that's not healthy. You do lose yourself by doing that, and you should have an identity outside of work that allows you to center yourself and find moments of happiness and build a community, create balance in your life.
Exactly. And I mean, some people have very high standards for themselves, and they can handle a lot more than me, for example, and that's completely fine. I just have to find my own boundaries so that I don't get to that point. And surround yourself with people that love you.
Exactly.
They will tell you when you're feeling
when you're feeling off, when you're feeling really down, they will know.
When you're not yourself, and they're like, okay, what's wrong?
What's going on?
Exactly. Because they care about you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so important that you mentioned that you shouldn't compare yourself to others. The only person you should be comparing yourself to is yourself. And we all operate differently. So some people might experience burnout for completely different reasons than others, and that's totally fine. It's who we are, and it does require accepting that our limits can be different from those of others, and that there's nothing wrong with that. It's just how it is.
All right. Thank you so much, Christina, for joining us today. It was really nice hearing about your experiences and everything that you've gone through. They are very valuable to this podcast and to everyone listening, because at some point we might all go through burnout or something close to it. So it's important to know about these things and how to deal with them. And it's always nice to hear about other people's experiences, in my opinion. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. No, it was a pleasure to talk with you, and happy to share these experiences. It's very healing.
All right, Sarah, that was quite interesting. Christina talked about a few topics. She touched on a lot of her experience, and I think that's pretty relatable. It's not that uncommon for people to feel burnt out from that sense, and
No.
I think a lot of our listeners would actually relate quite a lot with just day-to-day routines, as we talked at the beginning. Can happen often just with normal things, and
Yeah, I think it can have like certain degrees. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm fully burnt out, but just like you're starting to notice that you're going into this dull period of your life, and then you can kind of just step in and take the measures that needed to be able to take care of yourself again and get back on track.
so we will wrap up here. Just don't forget, if you're experiencing any burnout symptoms, or if you have any questions or any experience that you actually want to share, please send us an email at team@pokamind.com, and our team of psychologists will actually address those questions and hopefully answer them at any point. So yeah, please keep in contact, and stay excited. And I hope we poked some minds.
See ya!